Hello, greetings and welcome. We are here today. I wanted to talk a little bit about Pluto in Aquarius. And the reason I wanted to come on, I had kind of written this transmission out that just kind of encapsulated a touch of Pluto in Aquarius. But the reason I really wanted to come on and talk about this transit is because I think, it may be one of the most important transits of our lifetime. While Pluto moving into Capricorn was certainly momentous, um, the move of Pluto into Aquarius is, from an evolutionary perspective, um, I'd go so far as to say potentially why we all incarnated. Like, we incarnated and agreed to be the players on the playing field, be the people who met the challenges of Pluto and Aquarius. Why do I say that? Well, we are, depending on which school of astrology you adhere to or listen to, we are entering the age of Aquarius. We are all, as incarnated beings, on the kind of transition team between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. Now, the age of Aquarius does not begin in a single moment. It's not like um, something like Pluto. These are really long, big cycles. And so we transition to them. In like galactic astrology, it takes about 72 years for a point in the zodiac to move 1 degree. And so one would think that the transition from Pisces to Aquarius would take about 72 years, which is frankly a lifetime. In shamanic astrology, which is a paradigm of astrology that I am studied in, there is a belief that this transition sort of began back in the 60s and that we'll be wrapping it up here in the next couple of decades. But there are also astrologers who look at it differently and think that we're still maybe even 100 years away from joining the age of Aquarius. So whatever your precise beliefs are, I personally, through my own sense of working with astrology, always think that what is appearing in the collective is what tells us where we are from an evolutionary perspective versus needing a mathematical point that a computer can generate for us, or even a specific point that we can visually see. I actually think that there's so much more truth in just observing what's happening here on a collective level. And so what is the age of Aquarius, and why is this important? So moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius is a big deal because these cycles, these are larger cycles called the progression of the equinoxes. And essentially, moving into the age of Aquarius would mean that the sign that is behind the spring equinox is Aquarius versus Pisces. These take upwards of 2,000 plus years. And so we've all been in the age of Pisces for the last 2,000 years. In the age of Pisces, the age of the fish, the age of, like the Jesus avatar and Christian spirituality. And we can see now that like the Christian religion is on the decline. Dogmatic religions in general are on the decline. It's nothing like when I was growing up. Everyone was at church or somewhere over the weekend, whether it's in a mosque, a synagogue, or a church. Everyone was going, everyone belonged. There was like community in this sense around our three major religions. And you really were sort of a heretic or an outcast if you didn't belong to a congregation or to one of these larger religions. And now that is, we can see on the decline. I was looking at some numbers out of the UK, and it was like only 8% of people are going to church on Sundays, versus it's much higher actually in the United States. We have our nation's Pluto is in Capricorn, and so potentially Capricorn is more traditional in a sense than Aquarius is, and maybe that's why our numbers are higher. So there's that element. And then there's the element of technology. Aquarius rules progress, and the future rules AI. It rules like the bionic human, and like the idea that there's some perfected human avatar in and of itself, right? It's, as a sign, Aquarius is ruled not by an animal, but by a person, a water bearer. And there's this sense that with the relationship to the star card in the tarot, which is kind of the great hope of humanity, it's where we turn our eyes upwards, that we're on this mission, this perfected mission, and we are looking at something cosmic, something futuristic, progressive, new. And so technology and the internet and all of these things are ruled by Aquarius, and we can see that there's been an explosion in technology. When I was growing up, we had these pretty stable rates of introducing new technologies. We moved from like the cassette tape to the CD player, and the VCR to the DVD player. And, those things happened over a period of years. It was like this stable kind of evolution. And then as we've, I think, more firmly settled towards the Aquarian archetype being active in the collective, we've seen just an absolute explosion in the rate of technology, how quickly we can improve things. Um, we're talking soon about brain implants and downloading consciousness, and these are very, very Aquarian things. And so, why is it integral to the rest of humanity to have Pluto moving in here? And why did we choose to be people on the transition team? Well, Pluto, in and of itself, when it moves through a sign, it tends to kind of churn up the subterranean layer, right? It's related to, yes, the collective unconscious, but it reveals shadows. It's a great revealer, and it has something to do with the tension between truth and manipulation, or truth and secrets. And so as Pluto moves through Aquarius, there will be this opportunity for us to morally inspect, ethically come to terms with what this technology means, how we are going to use it in ways that are ethical and beneficial. Whether or not we're going to continue to keep our connection to what is human and what is real, what's natural and organic. I firmly believe, I've always been late to the party technology wise. I was like, I resisted getting a cell phone. I was the last one to have a beeper. I don't care for new technologies. I tend to have that like really like ancient old school ancestral thing. Like, I'll do dishes by hand. I like the feeling of the soap and the water. So I was last to get a dishwasher. I kind of think I have this old earth soul. And so I'm very weary about new technologies and what they're bringing to the table. And so there is this opportunity, this huge opportunity for us to bring collective discernment around what these technologies mean for our future as a collective. Not only does it rule technological advancements that help humanity, but it rules technological advances like in weaponry and in the war machine. And like, could we get so advanced that, I know we talk about a literal button that the president can push with nuclear energy, which, by the way, is ruled by Pluto. But like, could we get to the point where there's a literal button that can like implode the world? And the level of, what would you call it, negative imagination that we could be using, the nefarious ways that some of this weaponry could be used to take out people without their knowledge, it's a little bit scary, right? And so we have this 20 years of opportunity as we're on this great cusp of technological advancement. And I say great because it is. There's so much progress and innovation happening. There's so many, Aquarius is a genius signature. It's the signature of being connected to the the higher consciousness of the universe. It's an air sign, so it's got this kind of quick and mobile energy to it. It's ruled in modern astrology by Uranus, which is um, you know, literally like an antenna, right? Like to collective higher consciousness. It's very high vibe. It's a more subtle energy, but that is very electric, right? And like we said, it's connected to the internet and technology and advancements and genius. And, an archetype of Aquarius might be someone like Nikola Tesla, but we will need, we will need to, as the shadows come up, as Pluto moves through Aquarius, really be taking the technology to task around whether or not it's a true service and benefit to humanity, and really looking at the ways this technology can be used for good or for ill, right? And that's why I think it's so important from an evolutionary perspective, because the checks and balances that are put in place over this next 20 years, just like, we have, let me think of one. I think it was Roosevelt who did the New Deal, right? And that New Deal has been sort of an undergirding of liberal democracies the world over. It's where, democracies have things like Medicare and Social Security, things to kind of undergird citizens so that they don't fall into a poverty. It's like a safety net, right? That safety net has served since it was put into place almost 100 years ago. And so we have to think about the fact that what we're putting into place through our systems of checks and balances for technology will potentially serve humanity for a very long time. And I think it's necessary that we start putting in these checks and balances. One of the things that we have happening right now is a lot of conversation around censorship and how global technologies can be used, and again, for good or for ill. So like if a country thinks that some truth is bad PR, they can essentially shut down conversation around that by contacting a social media network. And of course, I think that's wrong. I'm not for any censorship whatsoever. The town square is extraordinarily important. And moving into Aquarius, Aquarius is the sign of the people, whereas Capricorn was the sign of the government. Aquarius is the sign like power to the people. It's no longer where we have power congregated around a central pole. Like think of Capricorn as the beehive, and everything in the beehive is working in service to the queen bee. And those are the systems of power that we live inside of right now. When we move into Aquarius, essentially the Aquarian archetype is somebody who has said, this isn't working anymore. We can't progress. There's something slowed down, or the closed system is rotting or crystallized or ossified. There's some way that this isn't working and we can't evolve. So the Aquarian archetype has left the closed system to push out on the edges of society to move society forward, right? And these are like your heretics, your innovators, your mad scientists, your rebels, your revolutionaries, like everybody who's left the closed system. And then what happens is they go push out on the edges and they set up camp along the periphery of the edges. And they find their tribe in that way. Now you remember that Leo is the axis of Aquarius, so it sits on the other side, and Leo is all about individuation and that big radiant heart of the noble king. He is someone who has power, and what Aquarius essentially does is take that individuality that we have centered in Leo. Leo is about being our biggest self, right? Not necessarily worrying about anybody else, but allowing our biggest self to come out, to be seen. That essence self has a doorway outward. If you've done any of my work before, we've talked quite extensively about the Leo archetype and how Leo is all about that spiritual search for the essence of who we are, that sweet nectar, honey of essence that glows like the golden light of the sun being penetrated and allowing that essence to come out. So that's Leo, right? And there's this whole self-centered project in Leo. Now, the opposite side of that then is Aquarius. And Aquarius is about how do I maintain that self-sovereignty, that connection to self, that essence self, and bring that essence self to the group. So now, like I've said, from an evolutionary perspective, we've had people who were in the closed system. They've left the closed system because the closed system isn't working. They're on their own journey in service to humanity. It's always in service to humanity with Aquarius. They're the archetype of the humanitarian. Like something has to change here because it's hurting humanity, right? So in service to humanity, they're pushing out on the edges. And then they start to find their tribe, right? And I think this is a precarious evolutionary point. And in the piece of writing that I published the other day, and I will link it in the show notes here, I said, I think there's a test in Aquarius, right? So we've talked about Aquarius having this up and out energy. In the tarot, it's related to the star card, which is the great hope of humanity. And so like where we have to have hope in a brighter future, right? We have to have hope in our future in general to move forward. We have to have visionaries, and all these Aquarian archetypes are visionaries. Now, there's this evolutionary gate, I think, that we find inside of Aquarius where we can either get dumped back into the Capricornian energy, or we can move on to the Pisces. And this is another place that I think Pluto can be very helpful. So as we are redistributing power along the edges, finding our groups and tribes out in the Aquarian archetype, take social justice movements, for instance, okay? So this is an example of one that I've seen be de-evolutionized or de-evolved, I guess is the better word for it. So you had all of these social justice archetype workers leaving the closed system. They said something isn't working here. You know, like there is not equality in the ways that there needs to be, which is an Aquarian thought quality. It's egalitarian. It wants power to be more evenly distributed than just congregated at the top. So they left the closed system and they started to form a new ideology about how society should be governed. Again, this is very quintessential Aquarian. And they began to talk about this new ideology. And I know for me at first, I was very excited about it. I was very like, wow, this is really interesting. It's stuff I've never heard before, but I can hear essential truths inside of what they're saying. And a lot of their ideas about how we should move forward are very interesting. And I believe in the tenets of these things. There should be more equality. There is too much structuralized racism, etc. However, then what happens is because Aquarius is an air sign and it rules ideologies, right? You kind of got like, I tend to think of the air signs as like Gemini being ideas. This is my own theory. Libra being ideals, like where we look to what's the ideal thing here. And then Aquarius is ideologies. Aquarius is fixed sign energy. And so it has the potential to get dogmatic in a lower expression or in a less exalted emanation of the energy. And so we had the social justice movement come in and it had all of these great new ideas. And under this umbrella, there were lots of diverse ways of thinking about something. And in the early stages, you know, when we're working with new ideologies, we're grappling with stuff, we're wrestling, we're trying to figure out how does this work? And then what happened is it began to move mainstream. And when the mainstream, especially on the left, when the mainstream got a hold of it, then it was like it began to exalt certain ideas and throw out other ideas. It began to crystallize like that Capricornian, like anything that goes into the funnel of the mainstream, it started to crystallize. And now you've got, they're canceling each other. It's just become this very toxic environment where new ideas aren't able to flourish. There aren't the same level of variety is necessary in any healthy system, right? You've got to bring in the novel and have lots of diversity and variety for a healthy ideology, let's say, right? There's got to be people who can disagree, have different opinions. And then what I started to see over the last few years is that, if you don't, it's like the mob mentality took over. And if you don't agree with the specific tenets of the social justice movement, you can be canceled. It's happened to some of my friends who have questioned some of the ideologies. Really deep annihilatory canceling. So that's just one example of how, if energy doesn't make it through Aquarius, it ends up getting funneled back into Capricorn. And what do I mean by that? So essentially, the exalted form of Aquarius is where the material, because it's all about generating material, right? Materialism. It's the new. It's like, how do we create new things? How do we innovate? How do we have technologies that work for other people? Essentially, if that doesn't get married to spirit on the Pisces side, right, and get drawn through and looked at from a spiritual lens, integrated in a healthy way, then we end up being funneled back into Capricorn. The mainstream ends up co-opting it, and then it just kind of gets recycled into the mainstream conformist, dogmatic system, right? And so I feel like Aquarius is this really interesting linchpin where we have the capacity to, generate new innovations and then marry them to, remember, Aquarius has this like upward trajectory. The energy of Aquarius is like up and out. So as they're coming up and out, it's like we've got to let Pisces catch them. We've got to let spirit actually be involved in how they're rolled out, in how they're integrated into society. And if it's not, and I want to say, the more we move away from the Piscean age, it seems like we've done that thing that Jung talks about, enantiodromia. It's like where we slide so far on one side of the pendulum to correct for an evolutionary problem. It's like we've gone so far into the materialistic and away from the spirituals. People are moving away from dogmatic religions, and we're having all of the great and necessary conversations about how they were harmful. It's like, well, then we're not running the advancements through the spiritual, and they're just kind of dying on the vine. They're getting thrust back into the material realm, and they're not living up to their full potential, and they're creating a lot of harm. I don't love the word harm. A lot of they're clogging up the system with toxicity and sludge. And the really wonderful thing about Pluto is, he rules the subterranean layer, right? The subterranean layer inside of us, the subterranean layer inside of the collective, rules the unconscious, but he really does have an action of flushing, of detoxifying, purging through the way that he behaves, right? And so I do think we'll get a view of this toxicity as well. And so as people who incarnated to be here now in this great transition point of the age of Aquarius coming online, like we are all definitely on that particular transition team. And then really being emissaries to work this evolutionary transit of Pluto in Aquarius, like really doing the work, like what's coming up from the subterranean level, and how do I take that subterranean level and marry it to spirit, like find a way to integrate materialism and spirituality, right? And what's so great about this, and I love it because these last few years have felt so heavy. I mean, Capricorn already is a heavy and slow sign. It's an earth sign, so things can feel very stable here. It can be harder to move. You know, like I said, Aquarius is quick, and a word for Aquarius could be quantum, right? And so, like, how do we marry the what's going on in the subterranean to the quantum? And I mean, this is like next level opportunity for timeline jumping, for really like the kind of healing that is what we would term miraculous. It's just going to be this really extraordinary time. However, we need to watch for the shadows, and we need to catch them, deal with them, whatever they're asking of us, with whatever the invitation is, discern the invitation, meet what the invitation is requiring of us, and then marrying that thing to spirit in some way, like seeing how does it fit into greater to natural law. Does it fit into natural law? Is universal law supportive of this technology, or is this an offense? Like the greatest threat humanity is under right now is the threat of losing the organic, our connection to the natural and to the natural human. I think there will be this great drive, and there has been the last few years. We always get foreshadowings of it. Of course, last year, Pluto dipped into Aquarius for a little bit, but even before that, we had Jupiter and Saturn make that conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius in 2020. And there's been this percolation of this idea of what the perfect human is. And this can be a real shadow side inside of any air sign, but most especially Aquarius, because it's the fixed air. It's like the archetype of the archetype. Like an archetype is the perfect pattern of the thing it represents. And so we've got to be really careful that we're not exalting these perfect humans. And I think that's why a lot of people are getting canceled for their ideas, and especially from the groups that they belong to, because they're not living up to the archetype of the perfected human that ideology, that specific ideology is put forward. So, one of the things that like is really necessary is to have a strong, deep, spiritual, steady, stable, realistic, true connection to our humanity, and allow humanity to be messy, and allow ourselves to live outside of ideologies. Like we've got to be able to exist outside of ideologies. Our life is going to be pummeled and pumped and thrusted by all types of different ideologies in the next 20 years. And we need to be really careful about what we agree to, what we live inside of. Like we can either live inside our own unique natural rhythm, our own unique natural frequency. Doesn't mean that like we won't think some things are good in that ideology and some we agree with some of those things, but like not to get hijacked by the agendas of these different ideologies, because it's the mechanism of Aquarius to do that, right? And it will pull you up and out of your body. There is a lack of embodiment and groundedness in an air sign, in Aquarius, again, especially. And once it's fixed, when we're in a fixed energy, we can almost feel like we don't know how to get back. Like there is that sense of being crystallized. So like once we get co-opted and hijacked by the ideology, it can almost trick us into thinking like, oh, this is it. This is life. I'm doing the right thing and I'm a good person. And so I found my right vein. But remember, from an evolutionary perspective, we're moving out of the age of Pisces and out of dogma. And so really catching ourselves to not get into we're swept into these ideologies that offer hope. And so another consideration with Aquarius is, it is in the tarot related to the star card. The star card is like the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like the great hope of humanity. It's like, I've noticed a lot of people saying like 2024 is going to be better. It's like that idea. Like after a long, hard, season, it's that like that necessary, um, light or star. And I think we also need to be in discernment about how hope can at times be a tyranny and how it can take us outside of what is real and what is true. And like everything, as an astrologer, I know the world is paradoxical. So we need hope and using our discernment around when we are putting all of our eggs in the hope basket. And the hope now has become a tyranny in and of itself. And we're in the hope so much that we can't be with what is real or the isness of life. Hope can sometimes become an illusion or like when you live your life, ideologies are hopes, right? When you live your life completely looking at like the way things should be, you have trouble being with the way things are. And being with the way things are is a window or a doorway. It gives you the key to being with what is real, what is natural, what is organic. And so we can't lose sight of that inside of this Pluto in Aquarius. I mentioned on that writing I did that in Skydancer, I have my students do this practice called true beauty versus glamour magic. And I try to make these representations very subtle so that they actually have to think about them. But, I'll put pictures that have been airbrushed or, they're from advertisements or, and anytime you're being advertised to, you're being giving someone's agenda, right? Their agenda is to get you to do something, to manipulate you. And then I put examples of true beauty, right? And true beauty is so much different than glamour magic. True beauty might be a beautiful black and white photo of a grandmother and all of the different gorgeous silvery cracks in her skin, or the grimace of a mother's face as she's giving birth. And that might not be glamorous, but it is beautiful. And it opens you, like when you're in the presence of beauty, beauty has a particular transmission, right? I learned this from my teacher, and it's like it's revolutionized just my capacity to discern, right? To use my body and what happens inside my soma as an oracle of, truth versus untruth. And so this idea that like, true beauty has a particular transmission and it speaks in some way. And what is spoken, if it's beautiful, is opening, it's heart opening. It draws you in, it invites you in. It's as though you're meeting it through its transmission. You're meeting the essence of the thing that you're beholding, that you're looking at. And glamour magic is flat. Like it doesn't have that essence of truth behind it, of realness behind it. And so I wanted to talk about that practice, like as you're on the internet, as you are engaging with people, with art, with, the internet is kind of like ground zero for Aquarius, right? And any age of Aquarius, it's like when we're engaging with technology or through technology, can you use the images, the artistry, the advertisements, the agendas, just all of the images that are coming at you all day long? Can you begin to play with discerning, like, is this real? Does this open something inside of me? Am I in the presence of the natural and the organic and the true, the real versus the unreal, the untruth, the propagandized, the agendized. It's going to be so easy without this muscle to convince us of anything moving forward. You know, deep fake technology is really concerning, and the level in which it's able to fool people is beyond frightening. And this is what I mean about we need to talk about laws, about how do we govern this, and like what is the punishment for somebody using this? You know, what if they use it during elections to fool us? Or you know, right now we're having a war in the Middle East. Like, what if deep fake technology is being used to prop up either side of that war to justify it? Like, these are huge ethical questions that we need to be with as Pluto moves through, because it's going to set the standard for the next 100 years. And so those were some of my thoughts that I had on Pluto in Aquarius off the top of my head. I did make some notes just because I never want to like make a video and then get off and be like, I didn't say something. Yeah, like, oh, how do you know something's Aquarian, right? Like we talked about the Aquarian archetype being the exile or the heretic or the innovator, the mad scientist. It's just a weird sign in general. It's like one of these signs that's a repository of things. It's kind of like everything that's left the closed system. So it mm, it collects a lot of different stuff. Yes, the future, yes, progress, yes, technology, the internet, but anything that's kind of like eclectic or innovated, um, anything that is in the realm of ideologies, UFOs, anything that's off Earth travel. Remember, it's like the more than organic. Um, anything that's advanced, like ahead of its time, anything that's evolutionary. The modern ruler is Uranus, and Uranus is in Taurus, and Uranus is about to go direct. So with Pluto in Aquarius, we want to keep an eye on Uranus, who happens, like I said, to be in Taurus, and Taurus rules like money, the economy. Aquarius rules circulation in the body. And so there may be an issue with money, how the economy is structured, the way money is circulated, the rules and laws about money. Yeah, so I'm just making sure. Oh, so so in medical astrology, we would say that Uranus or Aquarius rules circulation. And I happen to think we talk about Mercury ruling the nervous system, but I happen to think, like, you know how Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. They're both connected to air, and it rules higher consciousness. And thus, I think it rules. This is my personal theory. I don't know if you'll find a lot of astrologers who agree with me or not, but I think it rules the collective nervous system, right? Aquarius and Uranus. And so when one of those things are active, like Pluto being in Aquarius or something, like a detrimental transit or aspect happening with Uranus, there's this way the collective nervous system can get provoked, right? We already know from that writing I did yesterday that Pluto rules mass psychosis, mob mentality. And so when you've got Pluto and mob mentality active and the collective nervous system, it's like we are primed to be propagandized, lied to, thrown off kilter, thrown off center, not responding in responsible, grounded ways. Like I remember the way that I responded to COVID, Pluto was involved in that, was not the way I would have organically responded if my nervous system wasn't so heightened and online. So that's another thing, another clue we can use to help with our discernment project with Pluto and Aquarius is, just kind of trying to take the collective pulse, remember circulation, Aquarius, and the collective beat of where our nervous systems are on a collective level. And at least we can titrate our own back down if the collective nervous system is getting out of sync. So amazingly, I covered all of the notes that I had, and I didn't want to make this too long. There will be so much to talk about going forward with Pluto and Aquarius. I can't put it all in one video. I think this is a really good start for where we are at the outset of Pluto and Aquarius. As he moves through and begins to make, he begins to talk to the other planets, make connections with them, there will definitely be so much more ground to cover. But I think this is a good stopping place. And yeah, it was lovely to drop in with you all. Thanks so much. Bye.